I was on a modest salary when I first met Sophia at a charity gala. Despite coming from a middle-class family, I never felt inadequate until I entered her world. The Blackwood family had old money, and they made sure everyone knew it. When I proposed to Sophia after 8 months of dating, I had no idea that signing that prenuptial agreement would eventually become my unexpected salvation. Looking back, maybe I should have seen the warning signs sooner. Before I share how our love shattered and the surprising turn of events afterward, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more real-life stories like this one. Meeting Sophia was like something out of a movie. I was volunteering at a charity gala for children's education primarily because my company encouraged community service. I never expected to meet someone like her there. Sophia Blackwood walked into the room wearing a deep blue gown that made her stand out among the crowd. Her confident stride and warm smile immediately caught my attention. I was serving drinks when she approached the bar. Our eyes met, and instead of simply taking her champagne and walking away, she struck up a conversation. She asked about my involvement with the charity, and I explained how education had changed my own life. To my surprise, she seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, even though I clearly didn't belong to the wealthy social circle that filled the room. "I'm Walter," I said, extending my hand. "Sophia," she replied with a smile that made me forget about our different backgrounds. I like people who care about making a difference. By the end of the evening, we had exchanged phone numbers. I honestly thought she was just being polite and would never call. But the very next day, she texted me asking if I wanted to grab coffee. Our early dates were a study in contrasts. I worked as a marketing manager for a mid-sized company. My salary was good, but nothing extraordinary. I lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment, drove a reliable but aging car, and carefully budgeted my expenses. Sophia, on the other hand, lived in a luxury penthouse paid for by her family, drove a brand-new Mercedes, and never seemed to check prices before purchasing anything. Despite these differences, we connected on a personal level. She laughed at my jokes, seemed interested in my ambitions, and often told me she found my work ethic admirable. When I took her to my favorite local diner, she appeared charmed rather than put off by its simplicity. When she took me to 5-star restaurants, she gently guided me through the complex menu without making me feel ignorant. "I love how real you are, Walter," she would say. Most men in my social circle are so focused on appearances. After 3 months of dating, Sophia invited me to dinner at her family's estate. The Blackwood mansion was intimidating, to say the least. Set on several acres of perfectly landscaped grounds, the colonial-style home looked like something from a historical documentary. A uniformed staff member opened the door and led us through a foyer larger than my entire apartment. Harold and Vivian Blackwood were waiting in what they casually called the small sitting room, though it was larger than any living room I had ever been in. Harold, a tall man with silver hair and calculating eyes, gave me a firm handshake that felt more like an assessment than a greeting. Vivian, still strikingly beautiful in her 50s, offered a polite smile that never quite reached her eyes. "So Walter," Harold began after we were seated with drinks, "Sophia tells us you work in marketing." What company? I named. My employer, which was respected, but certainly not prestigious. He responded with a slight frown. "And what are your long-term career goals?" The interrogation continued through dinner. What was my family background? Where had I attended college? What were my investments? With each question, I became increasingly uncomfortable, while Sophia grew noticeably tense. When Sophia excused herself to the restroom, Harold leaned forward. "Young man, my daughter has certain expectations for her lifestyle. I hope you understand that." "I care deeply for your daughter, sir," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. "Caring is not the same as providing," he said with a cold smile. When we left that night, I noticed the first real warning sign. In the car, Sophia was different. Gone was the warm, genuine woman I had been dating. She criticized my choice of tie and suggested that I should consider expanding my professional network to include more influential people. "My father only wants what's best for me," she said defensively, when I expressed my discomfort with the evening. "He built everything from nothing. You could learn a lot from him." This began a pattern. When we were alone, Sophia was loving and supportive, but whenever her family or friends were involved, she became someone different. She began making subtle suggestions about my career choices, my wardrobe, even my haircut. Our first significant argument came when she suggested I use my entire year-end bonus to invest in a friend of her father's startup. It's about connections, Walter, she insisted. This could open doors for you. It's also my financial security, I countered. I need to be smart about these decisions. She pouted for days afterward, calling me unnecessarily cautious and limiting my own potential. Despite these red flags, I was deeply in love. After 8 months together, I decided to propose. I spent weeks saving and researching the perfect ring. It wasn't the largest diamond, but it was high quality and beautifully set. I made reservations at the restaurant where we had our first official date and arranged for the staff to help with my plan. When I knelt and presented the ring, Sophia's eyes widened. She said yes immediately and held out her hand, but I caught the slight hesitation in her voice. As I slipped the ring onto her finger, she smiled and kissed me, but later that night I overheard her on the phone. Yes, it's official. No, the ring is smaller than I expected, but it's sweet. I know Daddy will probably have a fit, but I can always upgrade it later. No, I haven't told him about the house discussions yet. I pretended not to hear, telling myself that what mattered was our love, not the size of the ring, or whatever house discussions meant. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to that conversation. 3 weeks after our engagement, Harold Blackwood called and requested a private meeting at his office. His corporate headquarters occupied the top floors of a downtown skyscraper, with views that emphasized just how powerful the Blackwood family was in our city. His assistant led me into a conference room where Harold waited with another man who was introduced as Thomas Winters, the family's attorney. On the table between us lay a thick document. Walter, Harold began, in the Blackwood family. We have certain traditions and expectations when it comes to marriage. He slid the document toward me. This is a standard prenuptial agreement that we require for anyone marrying into the family. There was nothing standard about it. As I flipped through the pages, my stomach tightened. The agreement stated that I would have no claim to any Blackwood family assets or businesses. Any property or investments purchased during the marriage would remain separate based on who paid for them. If we divorced, I would leave with essentially what I brought into the marriage, regardless of its duration or circumstances. Mr. Blackwood, I said carefully. I understand wanting to protect family assets, but some of these terms seem unusually restrictive. Harold's expression hardened. My family has built its wealth over generations. We do not apologize for protecting it. Thomas smiled thinly. It's quite standard for estates of this magnitude. Miss Blackwood has significant trust funds and inheritance expectations that need protection. When I discussed it with Sophia later that day, she seemed surprised by my hesitation. It's just a formality, Walter, she said, waving her hand dismissively. Daddy makes everyone sign one. My cousin Angela's husband signed the same thing, and they've been happily married for years. It feels like your family is already planning for our divorce, I argued. Don't be dramatic. It's just business. Her voice softened as she took my hands. It doesn't change how I feel about you. I love you, not what you can give me financially. I spent days wrestling with the decision. Finally, I called my best friend Jake for advice. Are you kidding me, Jake? Exclaimed when I explained the situation. Walk away, man. This family is basically telling you that you're not good enough and never will be. It's not Sophia saying that I defended. It's her family. And who do you think she'll choose if it comes down to you or them? She's been controlled by their money her entire life. Despite Jake's warnings, I convinced myself that signing was the right choice. I told myself that I would never be after Sophia's money anyway, so the agreement didn't matter. What mattered was our love and commitment. The signing itself was cold and businesslike. Thomas Winters explained each provision while Harold watched with satisfaction. Sophia wasn't even present. When I asked if she would be signing as well, Thomas explained that her assets were already protected through family trusts, so her signature wasn't necessary. I felt diminished, but I signed every page, telling myself it was just the price of admission into this new life. Our wedding was exactly what you would expect from a family like the Blackwoods. 800 guests filled the historic cathedral downtown. Sophia's dress was custom designed by a famous fashion house. The reception was held at the Blackwood estate, transformed by an army of decorators into something that belonged in a luxury magazine. Through it all, I felt strangely disconnected. My parents, both public school teachers, looked uncomfortable in their wedding attire that Vivian had insisted on upgrading. My college friends clustered together at their assigned table, clearly intimidated by the surroundings. Sophia spent most of the reception moving between important guests, many of whom I had never met. When I asked her to introduce me to a group of people she was laughing with, she quickly introduced me as my husband Walter, before continuing their conversation about someone's yacht purchase, while I stood awkwardly on the periphery. The first few months of marriage were a honeymoon period. We moved into a beautiful house in an exclusive neighborhood, a wedding gift from the Blackwoods. I initially refused wanting to purchase our first home together, but Sophia convinced me it would be insulting to her parents to decline. Besides, she added, do you really want to live in some starter home when we can have this? The house was in both our names, which I found surprising given the prenuptial agreement, but Thomas explained it was structured as a gift to both of us. What I didn't realize was that this created the illusion of generosity while ensuring Sophia maintained a lifestyle her family deemed appropriate. The tensions began over finances. Despite the house being gifted, the property taxes and maintenance costs were enormous. Sophia spent money as if it were infinite, purchasing expensive furniture, artwork, and hosting lavish dinner parties to establish our social presence. When I expressed concern about our spending, Sophia would become defensive. My trust fund covers these expenses, she would say. Why are you so worried? Because we should be building our life together, I would reply. Not just living off your family's money. These arguments became more frequent. Sophia began attending social events without me, claiming they were just girls' nights or family obligations. She would return home late, sometimes smelling of alcohol and expensive cologne that wasn't mine. When I questioned her, she would turn the conversation around, accusing me of being controlling or insecure. This is the world I come from, Walter. If you can't handle it, maybe you should have thought about that before marrying me. The distance between us grew. Sophia spent more time on her phone, always turning the screen away when I entered the room. She began weekend trips with friends I had never met. Our intimate life dwindled to nearly nothing with Sophia, always claiming she was too tired or had an early morning. One night her phone buzzed repeatedly on the nightstand while she was in the shower. When I glanced over, I saw multiple messages from someone saved as J with heart emojis. The preview showed, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." Last time was. I didn't read further, my hands shaking as I set the phone down. When I casually asked about her plans for the next day, she claimed she had a charity committee meeting. The lie stung more than the suspicion. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more signs. Mysterious credit card charges at hotels we had never visited together. Hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when I entered the room. New lingerie that she never wore with me. I became withdrawn and depressed, still hoping there was an innocent explanation, still not wanting to believe that the woman I loved could betray me so completely. After weeks of suspicion and mounting evidence, I decided I needed to know the truth. Sophia had mentioned a dinner with her mother on Tuesday evening, claiming they would be discussing an upcoming family foundation event. Instead of going to my weekly basketball game with friends as I normally would, I waited in my car a block away from our house. When Sophia left, I followed her at a careful distance. She didn't drive to her parents' home or to any restaurant. Instead, she drove to the Grand Meridian Hotel downtown, one of the most exclusive hotels in the city. I watched as she valeted her car and entered through the main entrance, looking radiant in a dress I had never seen before. My heart pounding, I parked and followed, staying in the lobby for nearly 15 minutes before gathering the courage to approach the front desk. I claimed to be surprising my wife for our anniversary and described Sophia. The young receptionist, clearly a romantic, smiled and told me Miss Blackwood was meeting someone in the rooftop restaurant. The elevator ride to the top floor was the longest of my life. Each floor brought me closer to a truth I already knew but didn't want to face. When the doors opened, I saw them immediately. Sophia was sitting at a corner table with a man I recognized from Blackwood family events. Jackson Taylor, the son of one of Harold's business partners. He was leaning close to her, his hand on hers, and then he kissed her in a way that left no doubt about their relationship. I felt physically ill. Somehow I had the presence of mind to take out my phone and discreetly take several photos before leaving. I didn't confront them. I couldn't bear to create a scene or to hear whatever lies Sophia would invent. I drove home in a daze, packed an overnight bag, and went to Jake's apartment. I showed him the photos and finally broke down all the pain and betrayal pouring out of me. "I told you that family was trouble," Jake said, handing me a beer. "What are you going to do now? I don't know," I admitted. "The prenup means I'll lose everything if we divorce. You need to talk to a lawyer, Jake insisted. That prenup can't possibly cover everything. The next morning I returned home before Sophia would be awake. I sat in the kitchen waiting. When she finally came downstairs, she was startled to see me. "Walter, I thought you would be at work by now," she said, her voice slightly higher than normal. "We need to talk, Sophia," I said quietly. "I know about Jackson." Her face went through a series of expressions: shock, fear, and then surprisingly indignation. "What are you talking about?" I placed my phone on the table screen up, showing one of the photos from the night before. "I was at the Grand Meridian last night. I saw you. I saw everything." Her denial crumbled. "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, then her expression hardened. "A few months. But you drove me to it, Walter. You've been so distant, so concerned about money and status. Jackson understands me." "Understands you?" I laughed bitterly. "He understands that you're wealthy and willing to cheat on your husband." "You don't belong in my world," she said coldly. "You never did. My parents were right about you." Her words cut deep, but they also sparked something unexpected: anger. Not just at her betrayal, but at how I had compromised myself trying to fit into a world that never wanted me. "Get out," she suddenly demanded. "This is my house. I want you out by tonight." Actually, I corrected her. "This house is in both our names. You can't legally force me to leave." Her face flushed with rage. "My father will destroy you. We'll see about that." The next day, I met with Daniel Thompson, a divorce attorney recommended by a colleague. He was known for handling high-conflict divorces involving significant assets. "Based on what you've told me, we need to review this prenuptial agreement carefully," Daniel said after hearing my story. "These documents are powerful, but they're not always airtight." We went through the agreement line by line. When we reached Section 7, Daniel suddenly smiled. "Well, this is interesting." The section detailed infidelity provisions. If either party committed adultery, proven with clear evidence, the injured party was entitled to compensation and potentially excluded the infidelity clause from the asset division. Essentially, Daniel explained, this clause was almost certainly included to protect the Blackwood family if you cheated, but it works both ways. With your evidence, we can argue that Sophia violated the agreement first. "Will that hold up in court?" "It might not have to," Daniel replied. "The Blackwoods value their reputation above all. The threat of a public divorce trial with evidence of Sophia's infidelity might be enough to negotiate a fair settlement." With Daniel's guidance, I hired a private investigator to gather more evidence. What he uncovered was devastating. Sophia's affair with Jackson had been going on for nearly a year, starting just 2 months after our wedding. There were hotel receipts, photos of them together, at out-of-town locations, and even evidence of gifts purchased with our joint credit card. The investigator also discovered something unexpected. Jackson was engaged to another woman the entire time, the daughter of another prominent family. Their affair was a double betrayal. Armed with this information, I requested a meeting with Harold and Vivian Blackwood. Their initial response was predictably hostile. "How dare you make accusations against our daughter?" Harold thundered, when I arrived at his office. "I'm not making accusations," I said calmly, placing a folder on his desk. "I'm stating facts. Facts that I'm prepared to make public if necessary." Harold's face reddened as he looked through the evidence. Vivian gasped at several of the photos. "What do you want?" Harold finally asked, his voice tight with anger. "A fair divorce," I replied. "I won't try to take any Blackwood family assets. I don't want your money. But I want to keep our house, which is in both our names, and I want compensation for the emotional distress as outlined in Section 7 of the prenuptial agreement that you insisted I sign." Harold looked like he might explode, but Vivian placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Harold, he has us. Think of the scandal if this gets out. Think of what the Taylors would do if they learned about Jackson and Sophia." It was the first time I had seen fear in Harold Blackwood's eyes. His precious social standing and business relationships were at risk. "I'll have Thomas draw up settlement terms," he said stiffly. "No," I countered. "I'll have my attorney draft them, and I want this resolved quickly and quietly." As I stood to leave, I couldn't resist adding, "It's just business, right?" The settlement negotiations moved swiftly. I retained ownership of our house, received a fair financial settlement that acknowledged the career opportunities I had sacrificed to accommodate Sophia's social obligations, and signed a mutual non-disclosure agreement to keep the details private. When Sophia learned of the settlement terms, she was stunned. She had expected her father to handle the situation, as he had handled everything else in her life. The realization that the prenuptial agreement she had dismissed as a formality had become the instrument of her undoing was a bitter pill for her to swallow. "You planned this," she accused during our final meeting to sign the divorce papers. "You used us." "No, Sophia," I replied quietly. "I loved you. You're the one who had a plan." The months following my divorce were challenging but transformative. At first I rattled around in the large house that no longer felt like a home, surrounded by expensive furnishings that had never really been my taste. Gradually I began to reclaim my life. I redecorated, replacing the cold, showroom-perfect rooms with spaces that reflected my personality. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my marriage and strengthened my relationship with my family, who had always supported me despite their misgivings about Sophia. I threw myself into my work, earning a promotion that I had previously declined, because it would have required travel that Sophia opposed. The increased income and professional recognition helped rebuild my self-esteem, which had been severely damaged during my marriage. Jake convinced me to join a community service organization, where I volunteered teaching marketing skills to underprivileged youth. The work was rewarding and helped put my experience in perspective. Many of these kids were fighting much greater battles than a failed marriage to a wealthy socialite. I started running again, a passion I had abandoned because Sophia considered it common. Each mile I logged felt like another step away from the man I had become in that relationship and back toward my authentic self. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Jackson Taylor had married his fiancée, abandoning Sophia when she was no longer useful to his social climbing. The Blackwoods, embarrassed by the divorce and the potential scandal, had reduced Sophia's access to family funds, insisting she demonstrate more responsibility. It was a cool autumn evening when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Sophia standing there looking beautiful but somehow diminished. The imperious confidence that had once defined her was gone. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. Against my better judgment, I let her in. We sat in the living room, now warm and comfortable with my own furnishings. "You've changed things," she commented, looking around. "I've changed many things," I replied. She took a deep breath. "I made a terrible mistake, Walter. I know that now. Jackson was. He was nothing. A distraction. I was foolish and spoiled, and didn't appreciate what I had with you." I remained silent, watching her carefully. "My parents have cut me off until I demonstrate financial responsibility. Jackson is married to Eliza Parker. None of my friends will speak to me because they're all afraid of crossing my father." Tears welled in her eyes. "I have nothing, and no one." "What are you asking for, Sophia?" "Another chance," she whispered. "We could start over. I know you still care about me. We had something real before I ruined it." "No, Sophia," I said gently. "We can't go back." "Is there someone else?" she asked, a flash of the old entitlement returning. "That's not relevant," I replied. "What matters is that I've learned what I deserve in a relationship: trust, respect, honesty, things that were missing in our marriage from the beginning." "I can change," she insisted. "I believe you might want to," I acknowledged. "But we're different people now. I've moved on, and you need to do the same. Find out who you are without your family's money and expectations. Build a life that's truly yours." She cried, then real tears that smudged her perfect makeup. When she finally left, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Not just the lingering attachment to our failed marriage, but the last vestiges of doubt about my decision. In the year since that evening, my life has continued to improve. I've been dating Amy, a woman I met through the volunteer program. She's kind, genuine, and values me for exactly who I am. My company has offered me a partnership track, recognizing the innovative campaigns I've developed. I sold the house using part of the proceeds to purchase a comfortable home that better suits my needs, and donating a portion to the education charity where Sophia and I first met. There's a symmetry in that which feels right. The greatest lesson I've learned through this experience is that authentic happiness never comes from trying to be someone you're not, or from chasing approval from people who don't value your true self. Real love doesn't require a prenuptial agreement or constant compromises of your core values. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best outcomes. If Sophia hadn't cheated, I might have spent years or even decades trying to fit into a world that was never meant for me, slowly losing myself in the process. I don't harbor bitterness towards Sophia or the Blackwoods anymore. In a strange way, I'm grateful for the experience. Their prenup designed to protect them from me ultimately protected me from a lifetime of pretending to be someone I wasn't. Have you ever had to start over after betrayal? How did you rebuild your life? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming life's unexpected challenges. Share this video with someone who might need to be reminded of their own worth. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads to finding exactly what you need.